So my theme today is the overhuman. I use that word particularly because the term Superman is a comic book, a title of a comic book character, and it does not really capture the word Übermensch in German or the Greek Hyperanthropos. The German word Übermensch is a direct translation of the Greek Hyperanthropos. And what is very important about both Übermensch and Hyperanthropos is that the word Mensch in German and the word Anthropos in Greek refer to both male and female humans. So it is not just a superman, a man who is superior. It's also possible for a woman to be an Übermensch. Now, the concept of Übermensch has a long prehistory in Western philosophy. To begin with, Western philosophy in antiquity was primarily not so much a set of doctrines that were advanced with truth claims attached to them, but it was a praxis of living, a striving for self-perfection, a striving to overcome the weaknesses of oneself, a striving to become higher than one was. We find this discussion already in Plato's Republic. In books 8 and 9, detail in some form a vision of a higher human being who has worked on himself or herself, and a lower human being who has not done so. And both of these are linked to political order. So it is a fundamentally political conception in Plato. Now, Plato does not use the term hyperanthropos. Apparently, the word hyperanthropos was invented in the 1st century before our era by the Greek historian of Rome, the Roman Empire, Dionysius Halicarnassus, who invented the term in his history of Rome, designating the Greek influence on Rome. Then the word had a very ambiguous history. It was both used to put down, and it was used to affirm. For example, the humorist in the 2nd century, Lucian of Samosata, he was a satirist, and one of the things he wrote was Toccata Blues, the downward journey, and it details, he uses the term hyperanthropos to make fun of a tyrant when he arrives at the river Styx before he crosses down into Hades. The story Toccata Blues is the downward journey, the death, the journey into death, and it is a whole bunch of dead citizens arrive at the corner, at the border of the river Styx, the river that leads into the underworld, and there they have to pay the fairman Chiron. They have to pay him a fee for them to transport them across. And there are children there. There are several philosophers who are happy to go across. But there's also a tyrant who dies, according to him, prematurely. And the only thing he wants to do is he wants to go back up to finish his tyrannical labors. And so he is trying to negotiate with Chiron, the ferryman, not to transport him across into Hades, but to let him go back up. And there is a carpenter who used to live next to his palace, and that carpenter says, well, here is this guy, this hyperanthropos, this overhuman, and look what a pathetic figure he casts now. How he is striving, and when I lived up there, I lived near his palace. He was the lord of everything. He had lots of female lovers and so on. And now look at him, how ridiculous he behaves. So in this case, the term hyperanthropos is used mockingly. However, there are also Christian uses of the term hyperanthropos. In the same century, 2nd century of our era, the Montanus of Phrygia, a Christian preacher, the founder of the movement of Pentecostalism, interesting thing about it is that he would go around with 2 women who would also preach and who would go into ecstatic convulsions as they were preaching the words of Jesus. Now the vision of Montanus of Jesus was that Jesus was not the Son of God, but Jesus was a hyperanthropos, an overhuman, who achieved a higher vision, and because of his higher vision, he was able to teach others. Now that vision of Jesus as a hyperanthropos, as an overhuman, rather than as a, shall we say, as a Son of God, was then later rejected as the Montanist heresy. However, the term hyperanthropos was used frequently, both in a mocking sense, in an affirmative, praiseworthy sense, by Christian writers. Thus, for example, in the 16th century, the leader of a Dominican monastery used the term in Germany to refer to Lutherans, saying, who do they think they are? They think they're higher humans. That's why they want to found a new religion. But the word hyperanthropos is for the first time translated into German Übermensch in the 17th century by a professor of Orthodox theology at the University of Rostock, Heinrich Müller. And Heinrich Müller uses the term Übermensch for the first time in the German language in a set of essays of his on spiritual memorabilities. And from there, the term finds its way into the German language. It is used by Herder, by Goethe, and then, of course, the prime user is of the concept of Übermensch is Nietzsche. Now, Goethe uses it rather ambiguously in Faust 1. Faust thinks of himself as an exceptional human being, and at one point the character in the play says to him, what are you all about? Just look at how pathetic you really are, and you think you're an Übermensch, right? But in Nietzsche's term, in Nietzsche's Zarathustra, the word Übermensch is used by Zarathustra, who comes to preach in the marketplace, and he sees all these guys there waiting for a tightrope walker, and the Zarathustra comes and says, well, I'll preach you the Übermensch, because the human beings should overcome themselves and should strive to be higher. What you are the last humans. And Nietzsche's vision is that the last human that exists in this era of the disintegration, the nihilistic disintegration of Christianity, the the last human should be overcome. Human beings should strive to lead different lives. And Nietzsche has a vision of philosophy as self-transformation, a struggle with oneself, a self-transformation, and the Übermensch is the symbol of that struggle. Now, from that point forward, then the concept of the Übermensch had a very ambiguous history. In the Nazi era, it was used to designate the Aryan superhumans and to consider everybody as Untermenschen, as subhumans. Now, the term Untermensch, Nietzsche does not use that word, but it is something that is coined in the 20th century, both in the United States and in Germany by racist theorists. In the United States, Lothrop Stoddard, one of the main racists who wrote in 1922, he wrote a book on how the white race is being supplanted everywhere by the consequences of the principles of the French Revolution, which preach equality and of all humans, but the white race is superior and needs to stay superior. So he is one of the main advocates of the laws of very restrictive laws of immigration in the United States. In 1939 and 1940, before the outbreak of war between the United States and Germany, he went to Germany, was received by Hitler, by Himmler, by Goebbels, and was very much interested in the Nazi experiment with eugenics and sterilization and the suppression of what they called Untermenschen, with which they designated both the Slavs, the Poles. Poland was not really populated by human beings. Russia was not populated by human beings. That these were subhumans. These were subhumans that could be suppressed and that one could not, of course, intermarry with them. There was no, they advocated complete prohibition of what they called mixture, mixing between the higher humans, the Aryan superhumans, and the subhumans, the Poles and the Russians, and of course the Jews, the Gypsies, etc. Now, this, of course, is something that was often blamed on Nietzsche, the idea being that since he uses the term Übermensch so conspicuously, he leaves open the room for the creation of the Nazi myth. However, I would seriously object to this kind of interpretation because Nietzsche is completely opposed to the rise of the German Empire. Of course, he died in 1900. He had his collapse in 1889, and after that he was out of commission, incommunicado, in the Jena Institute for mentally ill persons. But before he was opposed to Bismarck, he wrote a hate letter to Bismarck and says, "We are enemies." He was totally opposed to the rise of a militant Germany that was linked with anti-Semitism. He was violently opposed to anti-Semitism. And he was also, because he believed in a united Europe. He believed that Europe should become one. He considered himself a good European. So every culture had something to contribute to the good Europeanness, and Nietzsche thought of himself, if his philosophy, as something that would be favorably contributing to the rise of a united Europe. But he did see that that would take a long time. There will be wars like there have never been wars before. Tyrants will arrive who will use all kinds of myths using from the nihilistic disintegration of Christianity. So this is, I believe, what I would say today about the word Übermensch and the concept of striving for self-perfection, striving for self-overcoming as one of the most important things that human beings can do.
Merci, Professeur Hutter.